Hello and welcome to Photographic Connections, the podcast where we create connection to self, nature and others through the art of photography. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections and your host for this podcast. And today I am absolutely delighted to be welcomed by Holland-based artistic photographer Charlotte Bellamy. We talk about the world of intentional camera movement and multiple exposure photography, how you can create stories in your images, the benefits of being a part of a like-minded photography community, and how mentoring has played a big part in both Charlotte's development as a photographer and the development of her clients' work. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Charlotte Bellamy. Charlie, what a pleasure it is to have you on the podcast today. We were really fortunate to meet last year in the beautiful Scottish Highlands at the Creative Light Festival run by Margaret Soraya. And I was so lucky to go on one of your multiple exposure and ICM workshops in the beautiful woodlands surrounding Drum the Droghets. I had such a good time that weekend and I learnt so much, and there was such a great community feel, which was really, really brilliant to experience. And if I remember correctly, that was your first time in the Scottish Highlands, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I'd been lucky enough to visit the Outer Hebrides 6 or 7 years ago, but it was my first time being immersed into the actual Highlands of Scotland. And what an immersion it was.
It was amazing, wasn't it? And the whole community feel was just so lovely, and to actually meet people who we'd heard of, because it was really funny. I remember the first night, I'd heard of you as Charlotte Bellamy, but you introduced yourself to me as Charlie, and I sat and was having dinner with you for an hour before I actually realised who you were. And I was like so embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh, like you're Charlotte Bellamy, and I'd like just had completely not realised. But what a lovely weekend it was, wasn't it? And it was just getting like a group of like-minded people together to just share ideas. And yeah, I love that there's more of this happening in the photography world, and to be a part of that was such a privilege. And I really wanted to invite you onto the podcast because your kind of vision in photography is very different to a lot of people's. And in fact, it says on your website or your Instagram page actually that you hate to follow the crowds. So you do a lot of very artistic photography, and you actually like to call yourself an artist, which I love to hear. I'd love you to go back way to the beginning of your photography journey and explain what got you into photography in the first place.
Gosh. Well, I've had a little camera ever since I was about 10 years old. My father was a big photographer, and I remember very, very clearly my mother always telling him to stop being David Bailey and to just hurry up and get on with it. You know, so that was my probably early immersion, that to be a photographer, you had to get on with it and do it. Otherwise, people complained. But my probably proper immersion into photography was back in, I lived in America. We're talking 18 years ago now. And I got my first digital SLR. And because I didn't have a green card and I couldn't work when I was out there with my husband, I had a young son. And I just started taking photos of everybody else's kids at like play dates and play groups. And suddenly everybody else, and sharing them for free. And everybody would say, oh, you know, can you come over our house? We'll give you $10, you know, just a little bit of pocket money in the hand. And that's how I got into it. We came back to the UK for my son to start school, and my husband said, well, why don't you give it a go, see if you can start your own business. I always wanted to be there for him when he was at school, so he had me to come home to and go from. And so it started there, and I started in portrait and wedding photography, and I did that until we moved to the Netherlands, which was in 2012. So that was where the sort of the people journey of the photography started. And then when I moved here, as I've told a lot of people before, the journey, I got here and I was all ready to make a new start with the business because I'd sort of undersold myself and I got myself into a certain market that I really wanted to move upwards. I thought, this is a great opportunity. I can do it, new location. And then I had a bit of a reality check because I couldn't actually speak the language. And I actually put my camera down for about 6 months because I'd got into this rut of thinking that photography had to make money. And I'd kind of got out of photographing for myself at that point. I'd made it my business and it was my job. And then when I couldn't communicate with people, and to make portrait and wedding photography properly, you need to be able to communicate with people. And because I couldn't do that, I didn't feel I could put myself out there. So I actually put the camera down because I didn't know what to do. And that's when my landscape journey started, because I found a mentor at the time and she said, just pick up that camera and photograph what you want. You haven't got any clients. You haven't got to make money from it. You've got to do it for yourself. And if you love what you're doing, you will fall back into love. And she was so right. And that's an ethos I've carried on, and I tell to so many people now as we go forwards.
That's so beautiful. It's really funny, isn't it, how life kind of turns out in many ways, and how you had this exciting new venture to the Netherlands and you were going to start up again and kind of shift into this new gear with your photography. But it's like almost like the universe was like, no, you can't do it. This isn't going to work. And then that kind of flipped you into now what you're doing, which you absolutely love doing. And it's nice to hear that, actually, because I think often people say when they turn their passion into money, you know, creating a business out of something like photography, they often lose the love for it. And I love that the mentor you had then turned around to you and said, photograph what you love and what you enjoy photographing, and you'll fall back in love with it. And that's exactly what's happened for you. And I think what's really interesting is that you went from not really doing any landscape photography in the UK to doing landscape photography in the Netherlands, because as many people will know, the UK has got incredible locations for landscape photography, but the Netherlands is very flat. So that must have been quite a challenge for you when you moved there as well, to go out into nature and try and find these opportunities.
Yeah, it still makes me laugh, because I left the UK and then I had to go back to the UK to visit several places I never photographed, because when you live somewhere, you think you've got all the time in the world to photograph it. So you think, yeah, I can do it. And we used to live not far from, is it Castle Combe in Gloucestershire? And I'd never been there. It's chocolate box pretty. I had to actually go back on a special weekend just to go and visit and photograph it, because I never did it when I actually lived in the UK. But coming here, yeah, it was just, I think once I'd finally decided that I'd have to give my landscape photography a go, and because I'd always thought, I can't make money from landscape photography, therefore it's not a job. I think once I sort of got my head around the fact that I was just going to make photos for me, then the pressure was off what they needed to be, and I could literally react to whatever I felt I wanted to react to. And the early photography that I took when I was here, it shows this eye-opening view of somewhere new, basically. It shows the arrival into a country where everything was different, and you're dead right, it is so flat. I do actually have hills half an hour from my house, but like that's about the only hills in anything north of the tiniest south bit of Holland. And it was just the fact that I was literally coming at this area as a kid. You know, my eyes were open and I just said, absolutely everything is brand new. And I find everything intriguing and exciting, you know, everything from straight line roads, which you don't get so many of those unless they're Roman roads in England. You don't get all these neat lines of trees. And like, I just find it so neat here, so organised, so precise, and that's very different. When I come back to the UK now to visit, I find it like not a bit of a mess, but it's unruly, it's wild. And when I came back to Scotland, I noticed the massive difference, the ability to be out in the open and just to be completely unmanaged. And here, if you find even in a national park, it's managed, where you're allowed to walk, how you're allowed to walk, everybody's kept apart from each other. And I think when you're given that difference, it's that difference in a location that you kind of revel in, and you can just go, wow, this is different. So I was almost responding to the differences and photographing the differences more than necessary natural beauty. It was just things I found interesting.
I love that you refer there to the childlike wonder. That's something that keeps coming up actually in this podcast, is people saying, you know, when they go out into the world, particularly into nature and doing photography, when they meet it with this new awe, this new wonder, these new fresh eyes of like discovering things for the first time, it just brings such a more deeper connection to the photography, and you enjoy it more because you're like, wow, look at this. And like, it does sound like there's quite a big contrast actually in many ways, like you just explained, between different parts of the UK and over in the Netherlands, just with the landscape there. And I guess without all those kind of stereotypical landscape locations like the mountains and the coast and the rugged woodlands, do you think that's possibly one of the reasons why you went into a more creative direction with your photography and getting into things like intentional camera movement?
Yeah, I think it probably was. I mean, I did the very traditional photography for probably 4 or 5 years, very traditional landscape photography. And maybe because we don't have this massive selection here, maybe it kind of reached a point at which I needed to find a new way to respond to the landscape around me, because it wasn't changing. It was staying exactly the same every year. And whilst I could go and photograph it, I realised I used to go to the top of the hill that is not far from us, and I'd photograph the heather every August, and I'd get up at 4:30 and I'd go there. And after 4 years, I was like, what can I do? This is exactly the same photo I'm taking every year. It's giving me absolutely no satisfaction. Yes, it's beautiful, but it is not challenging me. And actually, for me, a massive thing in my life is that I need to have a bit of challenge. And it's without fail, every year I get a bit of an itch that I need to try myself to do something new. And so I think, the intentional camera movement came first. And I actually found that when I was out on the Hebrides, and I brought it back here and immediately went to the trees with it. Obviously, there's not a lot of trees on the Hebrides, so I was introduced to it on the water and the landscape. But I immediately went to a place where I could see contrast, and the rest of the landscape's so flat that I didn't have contrast to work with. And then I suddenly became attached to the woodlands for the last 6 years, because they offer me a point of much more interest in the landscape, because you've got lovely mountains and you've got lovely hills and things where you are for ICM, but try ICMing flat land. It's quite a challenge. I've actually learned how to create hills with my ICM in Holland. It's a new thing for me, and I delight in the fact that I can create hills in my photography that don't even exist. so it's all about bringing what you want as well into it. So it was a natural step, I think, to move towards the creative photography, because I needed to bring something new into the photography that had got a little bit stuck.
That's one of the most beautiful things about ICM, isn't it? Is that you can literally create anything out of it. Like you're saying, you're now managing to create kind of hills within your images. And I really realised that actually when we were doing the workshop with you, particularly when we were doing the multiple exposures, because when you're kind of layering things on top of each other, you can create patterns, you can create textures. And the main thing that I kind of took from that workshop was when you were speaking about telling a story, because in one single image, there's only so much you can get in it. But the great thing about a multiple exposure is that you can showcase different parts of the landscape or different parts of your location all in one image and bring them all together to tell a really interesting story. And I find that kind of creative element to it really enticing. And what you've gone on to create in the Netherlands is a really exciting thing, because it shows that you can do photography anywhere. And that's something that you are quite passionate about. Like, you obviously travel and do things, but you also love just walking out of your house and walking down the road and photographing your local area, and it still brings you wonder and excitement because you're photographing it differently every day. Because ICM, you never get the same results, you're always photographing something different. And is your kind of connection to your local area and your home, like, it's really important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is massively. And I still have to pinch myself, like the fact that I can go out and stand right outside my door 10 years after moving here and still make brand new images. Like, and I have this lovely set of massive windows which looks to the west. So I watch the sunset out of my massive barn windows. And the number of times I'm just stood there, or I'm feeding my horses, and suddenly I'm like, sorry guys, you're going to have to wait. I need to go and get my camera because I can't miss this. And it's right next to me on my doorstep. And I literally need to just go around the other side of the fence, and then I can get like a lovely shot. And it is not amazing landscape, but the trees, like, I just love this straight line of trees that I've got. And then I am sat there, that we have stunning sunsets. And literally, after being here 10 years, I've literally just found, must have been 2 weeks ago, I made a set of sunset images from the back of my house. And they started off as sharp images, just because I love the clouds. And then I ended up, by the end of it, there was hardly any light in the sky after 20 minutes. And I was literally photographing the twilight in ICM and then layering it a bit with the trees that were on the road. And I've produced an image that I absolutely adore for colour and sort of excitement and difference. And I do have to pinch myself because, like, that's just literally outside my door. But nobody would ever imagine that the Netherlands had beautiful landscape like that. But it's not actually beautiful. It's just what I see as being interesting and beautiful. So and when I did Master Craftsman with the Guild of Photographers all those 6 years ago, I literally, all of my pictures were made within 20 minutes of my house. I go out with my camera on my back, you go walking along the cliffs, I jump on my bike, And I bike because I see the geese flying off 2 fields away, and I go, that's a bit too far to walk. I'll just jump on my bike. And people say, you bike with €3,000 worth of camera on your back? And I'm like, yeah, that's what the Dutch do. So if I fall off, I fall off, but that's not the idea. But I just love responding. I do allow myself to respond these days. My son's a little bit older, so I don't have to be there for sort of pickups and drop-offs, and dinner can wait a little bit if it needs to. And so I do find myself responding even more to what I see outside my door. And it's just lovely to give you, because you have no intention, absolutely no intention or expectation, because you haven't gone somewhere specifically. It's kind of come to you, which is actually really quite special as well.
Oh, it's so lovely. I mean, expectation is something that often ruins photography, doesn't it? Like, you go out expecting something, it doesn't happen, and you get disappointed and frustrated. I love the fact that you've managed to create a life for yourself that really fits in around your kind of values in photography. You're living in this beautiful rural area. You've got your ponies, you've got your sheep, you've got your chickens, you've got dogs and cats, you've got it all. And you literally, like, just being able to view it and then just respond to it. I can really resonate with that. My dad lives in the country and he's surrounded by fields, and you get the geese coming in, you've got woods just up from him. And, you can be in his house and you can see the light changing and you just head out. There's so much opportunity. And I just think it's a really nice way, I think, to live, when you can live somewhere that really connects with exactly what you want to photograph. And that's kind of like my dream now moving forward in my photography. I currently live in a town. I really want to move back to the area that I was originally from and live somewhere more remotely, like, in a woodland or just outside in the countryside, so that you don't always have to travel, and you can, like you say, jump on your bike or just walk down the road, and there is opportunities everywhere. And it's finding that wonder. I love that you spoke there about photographing the sunset, and just the fact that you can kind of watch out your window and you can kind of go out and just photograph the different aspects of it and layer it with the trees down the road. It's amazing. I mean, do you find now, because you said at the beginning that you weren't sure it was possible to kind of make money out of landscape photography, but you've now gone on to be able to make money from what you're doing. You run workshops, you do online presentations and things. It's amazing because all your passions has come together and you're now making a living out of doing exactly what you love. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I did a degree in agriculture way back. Gosh, I don't know how many years ago now. It's a long time ago. Little did I know that this is where it would take me. And I know my parents said at the time, whatever degree you do, you can use it in whatever you do. But, this is probably not what they had in mind. But, it's taken me quite a long time. We've been here 10 years, and I can honestly say it probably took me 7 years before I was brave enough even to actually give it a go, because I was quite scared that nobody would want to watch what I did and nobody would want to come to a workshop. And the easiest way not to fail is not to put that workshop on to start with, because then you don't find out that nobody's going to come to it. So I sat there probably for about 3 years going, well, yeah, if I don't do it, I won't know. It's fine. And then eventually I bit the bullet. And I think it was my son got to a certain age and I kind of didn't have an excuse anymore not to give it a go. And when I did, I generally in life, I throw myself at things quite hard when I do it. And I did, and it responded, and it came just before COVID as well. And I just kind of, it's wonderful. I mean, to make a living out of just landscape photography, I don't think I could do that. But I've kind of created this niche working with people, which I always knew I wanted to do, but I just didn't understand that you could do it in the creative way we do it. I thought you had to be a teacher, or I thought you had to be a nurse, or something very direct to work with people. But this way, I just, I still get that lovely people interaction. I'm one of the world's helpers. I give so much of me because I love to help other people. And also I remember the people that given it to me in the past and how much it's made my life change. Like I talk about my mentors, they changed my life, and I will never forget how much they made. And if I can do that for other people and they gain the same back, it's like that makes it 100% worthwhile. And somebody interviewed me recently about being a mentor, and honestly, the joy I get from other people's achievements is matched by anything I achieve myself. If somebody else gets an award or gets an exhibition up, I am delighted for them as if it's my own. And that just makes me so happy that I can get that satisfaction. It's not even my own work; it's somebody else's work, but it's a shared experience.
It's so beautiful. So beautiful when you can find a kind of outlet that you enjoy, that you can then help others. I think we're all kind of here in some way to be of service in some ways. And like you say, like we often see it as the more traditional routes of teaching and nursing and whatnot. But I love that we're now living in a world where no matter what your interests are, no matter what your passions are, you can create something. But stepping past that initial barrier is terrifying. I can totally resonate with that. For years we sit there and we think, can I put this workshop out? Can I put this content out? And it is getting over that initial barrier. It's terrifying. And like when I started running workshops, a lot of them didn't get any bookings, and then gradually over time you tweak things, you learn things, and you keep going until eventually you create some sort of formula that does work and that does kind of get you there. I think definitely having a passion plays a big part in that. And when you're doing something that you love, which of course with you now with your ICM and your multiple exposures, you absolutely love it. And kind of going back there to you saying you did a degree in agriculture, although that doesn't link anyway to your photography, it kind of does, because you're now living in the countryside, surrounded by all this land, and you're connecting with it, and you live in such a rural location. I do find that no matter what we end up going to college, university, whatever it is to study, it does come back to us in some way, even if it's not a clear career path. It's something else. And with you, it's your living situation in many ways, and the connection to nature, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, I still have to pinch myself that I'm here. But as I will tell the story to many people, the deal breaker when we moved to the Netherlands was that I got a pony. So I said to my husband, okay, we'll move to the Netherlands, but I have to have a pony. And he said, okay, well, the pony's not living half an hour away, so therefore we need to find a little sort of farmstead, and that's then the pony can live here and we can live here, and you can go and feed it in your pajamas. So, it was all part of the deal when we made the move to the Netherlands. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. And then just all that building then on you creating something. I think to be able to live a life that's so connected with what you resonate with, and to be living somewhere that inspires you and that you can have that creativity. Could you imagine, do you think you'd still be doing what you're doing if you lived somewhere else? Do you think your location has been pivotal in many ways to you developing the way you have with your photography?
Yeah, I think so, because, I don't think I would, I can't see how I'd have made that move into landscape photography if we'd still been in the UK, to be honest. I would have just stuck with what I did, and I don't think I certainly wouldn't have been forced to give it a go and see, which I was kind of forced into it here. Sounds like awful, but it's forced in a good way, just because, I had to make a choice of whether I wanted to pick up my camera or not again. And I made that choice that I did. But I think, it can have a massive effect on you where you live. I mean, I've now lived in a lot of different places, and we lived in Chicago for a little while. And I know for a fact, and I think you live and you learn from your life experiences. Like, I know I will never, ever, if I have a choice, live in an urban location, ever. Because I want to, I used to go shopping in my welly boots in Chicago. Or I'd go and ride my horse and turn up in my jodhpurs and my stuff. And, that wasn't really the thing to do. But it was, I was like, I'm not changing for this, and you're just going to have to, I got some strange looks. Whereas here I can, my husband will go, are you going out in that? And I'm like, other people go out in this. It's fine. Everybody goes shopping in their horse gear here because it's a rural location. So I think, I've learned over the years what I need, and each time we make a step or we make a move as a family somewhere, or we take the next stage in life, I take on what I know I need. And I think I'm also becoming a stronger individual to know what I need and actually push for that as well at the same time. So, should we end up somewhere in the future, I think I would say, we do need to find somewhere that's got space around us. I can't be living too much, because I know it'll impact on my ability to be creative, or it'll impact on my ability to be happy even. And again, that's something that I think develops as you become more aware of yourself. And it's not a right, but I think it should be a right that we should all be able to be happy. It's not for everybody, because not everybody has the same opportunities. But, I think if you can be happy with yourself, you can get through an awful lot of other stuff. That's a bit deep, isn't it?
Oh, go there. I want this podcast to be deep. 100%. I want this podcast to be deep, because to me, this podcast isn't all about photography. It's about people's, experience of photography, what's got them to where they are, and what photography does for them. And hearing your connection there between creativity and living somewhere rural, that connection to nature, I'm really noticing that actually a lot of creative people, in fact, probably the vast majority of creative people, have this very deep connection to nature. And even writers and stuff, they'll often go away on like little retreats or go and like hire a bothy in the middle of nowhere to do their writing. It's like almost need that space to be creative. And when you're living somewhere that you've got that space all the time, it's like that is now for me my dream. I want that space. I want to be back in the kind of countryside or near the coast where I've got that space, because that's where I feel free, where I feel myself, and where I can create. And yeah, yeah, it's so beautiful, so beautiful. And I guess going back to the ICM and the multiple exposure photography, it's have you found in the last few years that it's become a lot more kind of recognized and well known? Because I'd not really heard of it much before, and suddenly like every second person seems to be doing it. There's like this big influx in creative photography. Have you noticed that in your journey?
Absolutely. Now, when I started with my ICM journey, probably 5-6 years ago, I can say that I was massively influenced by Doug Chinnery and Bowd Bailey. But you know what? Back then, Doug was probably the only one putting anything online to share with anybody. Now, other people might have been doing it, but they weren't willing to share. And that might have been that, I didn't find them, or it might have been that it was a little bit of a closed door, that it was something new people had found and they didn't want it to come out. Now, I know it's been going on for a lot longer than 6 years, but I think when Doug and Valda started sharing their work and sharing a little bit about how you could do it, it opened up the gates to other people entering in. And I got into it, as I say, maybe 6-7 years ago. And since then, it's gradually grown. I would say probably in the first 2 or 3 years, I still didn't really come across a lot of people doing it. But then I don't know how, but it did seem to make a jump at some point, and I can't pinpoint that point. But it's interesting because the more you do of something and the more you surround yourself with those kind of people, it's like you never knew about all these people that did something. But the minute you get into the group, you wonder how you never knew them before. They were probably there, but you just didn't mix with them and the experience wasn't there to start with. So I think it's probably a little bit of the two. Once you start, and for me, I'm lucky enough that people now come to me to work with me. But equally, I follow so many other ICM and multiple exposure photographers, and I just love there's such a massive community, and there seems to be enough people to go round. It doesn't seem to be these are my people and these are your people, and we can't possibly cross. And if there is that, I kind of am missing it because I'm so willing to share, with my groups, other people. But I just, I definitely think it's gone out. I mean, when you look in the groups, the She Clicks, there's the ICM Photo Mag, even in photo clubs, I still hear it's a little bit of a struggle in photo clubs to get ICM to the forefront. But even in the Guild of Photographers in the last 3-4 years, before I put my panel in, they'd never even seen it. And then it started to trickle through like 2 images a month, something like that. And I'm judging the images now. And probably we're getting maybe 10, 15 ICM images coming in a month. Now, for a non-specific ICM competition, I think that's actually brilliant. That people are being brave enough to put that work forward, even though they maybe know it's still not 100% accepted. And the thing is, the reason why it's struggling is because it's a creative pursuit. It's not a technically tick the box and it's there, done and dusted. It's so much your own interpretation. And when I work with my groups, I do critique, but I do not critique on a technical basis unless it's something that can make the picture even more perfect. For me, the story, the emotion, the feeling is far more important in ICM than ticking the boxes of whether something's on the thirds or something's got a definite focus point or whether you can see what it is. I think, for anybody doing ICM, the biggest thing should be, does your ICM image say what you wanted it to say for you? Who gives anything for anybody else,
Oh, I love it. I really like the world we're living in now. I know there's a lot going on in the world, a lot of stressors and stuff, but I love the fact that things are becoming more open. People are able to be more expressive. And it's funny, like I've done photography now for 14 years and I've really struggled to call myself a photographer because I'm not technically minded. Like I didn't get into photography the kind of traditional route. I was just going out taking photographs. for months before I even looked at composition and all that other stuff. It was just like I just had this connection with nature, and I just naturally went out and created images. And it's funny, I love how things have now evolved, because I feel in my own work, in my own kind of pursuit, although I do a mixture of kind of traditional landscape photography and the creative stuff, it's like I feel like I'm able to try, and I'm finding more of a kind of almost like title or way to explain myself now, because it's not really about photography, it's about the artistic and creative expression. And that's why I love that you call yourself an artist. And it was funny, I was in London in February and we were asked this question in this panel interview, do you call yourself a photographer or do you call yourself an artist? And I was like, wow, these questions are being asked now, and it's being openly accepted. And it's always interesting to hear people's interpretations. But yeah, I love that. And especially in something like I say, a multiple exposure, the emotion and the story is so important. And I do get quite a lot of questions from people asking, how do you create a story in an image? A lot of, I think, people that may be more technical minded are struggling with the story aspect of photography. So I wondered if you had any advice, actually, if anybody listening, if they're not really understanding what creating a story in an image means, what are you looking for when you're looking at images when it comes to telling a story?
Okay, so when I start with my photography, whether it be ICM, whether it be landscape photography, whatever, my biggest thing, I always go right back to the start, and I quite often do this before I even get the camera out of the bag. And this is what I teach whenever I teach. And I believe that the picture that you are going to make starts before you've even got the camera out of the bag. And I think it all comes down to recognizing what you actually notice in the landscape, in an object that you see. And if you can recognize what you're recognizing, if that makes sense, it's almost being able to focus yourself and actually spend the time asking yourself, because so easy, and I'm the world's worst. I get somewhere, I grab my camera and I want to capture it. And I know we've spoken about these words before, these very sort of, I'm going to capture, I'm going to take, and I'm going to, wrestle with this basically. And I think personally, if you slow down and you ask yourself, what did I just see? And why did I want to take my camera out of the bag? You will automatically bring story, emotion, because you will be so much more attached to the pictures you're making. You are no longer taking that picture. You are creating and you are making that picture. You are responding and you're recognizing to what you're responding to. You and I could both see a bunch of flowers, and you might see the red petals, and I may see the sharpness of the red petals. We might go into the woodlands, and I love it when I go into woodlands with groups, because everybody sees something different. And that's what I say. I say, you guys are all going to make different pictures, because you have to see different things. You guys, we are never going to see the same things, because that's not what we do in life, which is why we don't all end up with the same boyfriend or girlfriend, or because we all want something different, because we see things differently. And so I think that's the biggest thing when I go out, is that I say, what am I seeing? Why did I stop to make that photo? What did I see, and why am I responding to it? And quite often it's not even something I've seen, it's something I've felt. And I just feel, the number of times I go into woodlands, and actually I go to the tulip fields every single year, and honestly, without a question, the first tulips I see, I actually squeak, because it doesn't matter. Every year I'll actually stand there and go, I like literally let out this physical squeak, because the excitement in me, and those first few photos that I make are that excitement coming to the fore. I can go into the woodlands and there's a sense of peace, or, the way the sun's popping through and I haven't seen the sun for weeks. I embrace what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing. And I think the minute you start bringing that into your pictures, and just notice it, I don't think you can fail to bring that storytelling and emotion if you get a little bit closer to what you're actually photographing.
100%. And I've always noticed when I've been learning, particularly in photography, if you're told by somebody you have to photograph this, you have to stand in this location and photograph this scene, this is the best spot for the image, you don't enjoy it. But if you go out there and you say, what am I naturally drawn to? Because that's what I think we do naturally. We just go out and we're like, oh, I like that rock, I like that sky, I like this, I like that. But then I think a lot of us have this preconceived idea, but we need foreground, but we need this, but we need that, we need these compositional techniques. And it's lovely that we now have these more creative forms of photography. And it's funny, the kind of changing the language of the photography world is quite a difficult subject. I know I've spoken about it once or twice and I've received a bit of backlash. But I think it's nice because people are starting to change that language in some ways, and it's making photography, I think, more accessible to people. Because I know I've always struggled with the word shoot, and it just feels like I don't want to shoot something. I want to connect with it, you know. And it's funny. I was speaking to a client recently in Canada, and she was saying there was an American photographer way back. I can't remember his name, but it was way back in like the 20s or 30s, and he was already speaking about making images and creating images. But people just were like, "What are you talking about?" Like, and it just didn't really take off, that language. And it's nice now that the language is changing in some ways, because while it's nice to have both. It's nice to have the kind of shooters and the takers, but it's also nice to have the more subtle creative forms, because it means that photography can be accessible to everybody, no matter what words or genres or subjects you resonate with. There's something in photography that anybody can connect with. It's about just finding what works for them, And I am noticing that photography is just becoming more accessible and more creative, and with that we're getting this flurry of almost new terminology and communities, which is so incredibly beautiful. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of finish really speaking about the communities within ICM, because you've mentioned the ICM photography mag and stuff like that. So for anybody that maybe wants to learn more about ICM or multiple exposure photography, what resources is there out there that they can tap into?
Oh, where shall I start? Can I just go back very quickly to your mention about the language? Just go back. Actually, in the Netherlands, you don't actually take a photo. If you put take a photo in Dutch, it automatically changes it to make a photo.
Because
they don't even use that. Yeah, isn't that cool? But if I write it, if you ever try and write in Word, you write, "I want to make a photo." Word will ask you, "Did you not mean to put you went to take a photo?" If you try it in Word, you'll find that it actually auto-corrects you back to take from make. But in the Netherlands, ik maak een foto. I don't take a photo. It's a really interesting concept, that. And I just thought it was worth saying. The language, sometimes it's the language where you're brought up. So Dutch people don't take photos, they make photos. So it's a really interesting one.
I love that.
So, just a little nugget for you. Yeah. But going back to the communities and things, for me, the ICM photo mag has come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. Stephanie's been putting that together. Before that, or what else do I use? I tend to follow, I won't say any particular people. As I mentioned, Doug Chinnery very early on with his work. And I think it's a little bit of a rabbit warren. If you start following people on Instagram, for example, you will find out who else follows them. And if you start linking and following other people that link to other people, you will suddenly become aware of so much more work. And it's a really interesting one, how much you allow yourself to be influenced by other people's work and how much you actually are inspired by it. I think there's probably the two angles. Are you influenced or are you inspired? Or are you just trying to copy? Because there will always be people that do that as well. And you said right from the beginning, I like to do something other people don't. So if I see something, I'll go, that's nice, but I'm deliberately not going to do it because it's already been done before. But other things, I am involved with other communities, like Margaret Soraya has a lovely community that she runs. When I've done my workshops, everybody gets invited to be part of a community that I run as well, which doesn't cost anything. It's just to keep my groups together and let people continue to grow and to flourish and to have a place basically to explore, because so many people come into our lives, your life, my life, and then they're quite, I wouldn't say people are insular, but they're still quite scared to let the outside world judge their photography, because so many people aren't professional photographers. They're doing it as a hobby and it's for them, not for other people. And so people want these safe communities to share work within. She Clicks is a wonderful example. It's all females. And that was created deliberately so women would feel more comfortable without the technical harshness that comes with a lot of the male-dominated communities or landscape photography, in fact, I think. But so that's a lovely place. And I these places feel comfortable. And when you get the right group of people together, the support comes naturally. People don't backlash each other. People don't give each other critique when it's not asked for. People don't feel that they need one-upping on each other. It's a natural coming together of the same sort of people. And when you find those groups, stick with them, get involved, and enjoy what you can give and get from them, because it doesn't matter whether you're a beginner or you're an advanced, you can still give something that other people would like to take. So I would say, don't ever think that you're not good enough for a group. Don't ever think that you're not good enough to make a comment if anybody says you can, because everybody has got a valuable view that somebody will enjoy hearing and appreciating.
I love that. And there is literally communities out there, no matter what genre of photography, no matter what kind of community you want to be a part of. There's a number of free ones, as you've mentioned. There's also a number of paid ones. But, when you find one that you really resonate with and that's speaking to you and it's run by somebody that you really connect with, then it is so beautiful, because you grow, you feel supported, you have a team, not a team, but a community of people around you, and you have people to ask questions. You can, like you say, share without that fear of being judged. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to create with Photographic Connections as well. But I'm kind of going more down the well-being route of photography and linking the well-being aspect in with the creative aspect. Purely because my background's in nursing, so I'm trying to bring my past life as a nurse and health into photography and the well-being elements that can bring us. So yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Charlie. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if anyone wants to actually find out about you personally, could you let us know your website and your social media links?
Oh gosh, right, okay. My website is just my name, charlottebellamy.com. If you want to find me on Instagram, I'm Charlotte Bellamy Holland. And then I've got a YouTube channel as well, and that's Charlotte Bellamy Creative Photography. And you should be able to find me. Please be aware that there is a Charlotte Bellamy from Emmerdale, who is a really famous actress. That's not me. I do have people contacting me for my autograph. I said, I don't think it's me you really want. So if you don't come up with me, just make sure you put photography in there somewhere and you will get the right person.
That's hilarious. I actually Googled your website before we came on today, and the actress came up, and I was like, what? This isn't who I'm looking for. And it was funny, before I became bigger on YouTube, when you typed in Kim Grant to Google, a male footballer from, I can't remember what country, but that he would always come up, and I'm like, oh no. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's funny. Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Charlie. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kim, for inviting me on, and I enjoyed looking forward to all your other podcasts in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. It really does mean the world to me. As we spoke about community at the end there, if you are interested in getting involved with the Photographic Connections community, as well as our free weekly podcast, we also offer a free monthly photography challenge, which anyone, no matter where they live in the world, can take part in. And if you'd like to get further involved in the community, for just £10 a month, you can sign up to become a Photographic Connections community member. As part of the membership, you can gain access to our monthly teaching webinar, our community Zoom check-ins, access to our private Facebook community group, and a chance to feature in the End of Month Photography Challenge blog. You can find full details at photographicconnections.com. And now that we've reached the end of this week's podcast, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photography opportunities just waiting for you to discover.